From Babylon to Timbuktu, Chapter 6, The Final Dispersion of the Black Jews of Africa, 1 of 2. Many scholars call the inhabitants of North Africa Berbers, but I shall not do so. I do not like this word, Berber. First of all, it is not a native word of Africa. Therefore, it is misleading. The Greeks and the Romans called the people of North African Berber because Berber means barbarians. However, the people of this region have their own names. The unbiased Greek historian Herodotus gives the name of the original tribes of North Africa, beginning from Egypt, extending to the Atlantic Ocean. They are as follows: Adurmashadai, Gilligame, Asbate, Anshase, Kabbalians, Nasamonians, Nomidians, Phislae, Garaminations, Maccays, Jindanes, Lolopegai, Michelins, the Essenes, Troglodytes, Laphaeans, Gizantians, Alarantians, and the Atlantes. Herodotus says there are 4 nations in Africa. 2 are indigenous, the Ethiopians and the Libyans. The Phoenicians and Greeks are newcomers. Herodotus considered all the North African tribes to be Libyans, and all of the Africans below the Sahara he called Ethiopians. These are his 2 indigenous nations of Africa. The original inhabitants of North Africa were the Hamites. These Hamites were black like the Egyptians, and this point has been proven by Herodotus. Because most of the history in the Western world has been distorted, it becomes necessary for me to explain to you some of these distortions. A European writer by the name of Heinrich Barth says this: the inhabitants of the Wallada are a mixed race of blacks and whites. Now the question is, whom does he include as whites? Continues Barth, the whites are the Berbers and Arabs. These Berbers and Arabs were not white in ancient times. What is the basis for calling them whites? The obvious reason is that he wants to attribute ancient advanced civilizations to the white race in order to perpetuate the philosophy of white supremacy. Many black people have straight noses and thin lips. The black people that possess these qualities are said to have a white lineage. Joseph Williams has to say this about the blacks of West Africa: in most mixed groups of Negroes, a Songhost may be identified at first glance. His skin is black as theirs, certainly, but nothing in his mask conforms to their well-known characteristics. The nose of the Songhost is straight and long, pointed rather than flat. The lips are comparatively thin, and the mouth wide rather than prominent and broad, while the eyes are deeply set and straight in their orbits. A cursory glance shows that the profile resembles that of a European. Some European writers even penetrate into the blackest Africa and divide the blacks according to the shapes of their noses and lips. Continue Williams. Songhaste, through black skin and woolly hair, their features are often of Caucasian cast. There are many colored people in the United States with straight noses and thin lips, even as black as tar, and the Europeans does not classify these colored people as belonging to the white race. After extensive research, my conclusion is this: some European writers have classified certain tribes in Africa and Asia as belonging to the white race. They do this as long as it is psychologically advantageous in order to infiltrate their ego and give them a prominent place in Afro-Asian history. Not only were the people of Africa and Asia black in ancient times, but also the European lands of the Mediterranean. The Canaanites, or the language which is called Hebrew, Phoenician, or Canaanite was employed in the lands called Phoenicia, Palestine, or Canaan for over 1,000 years before the Armenians, Abrahams, the Isaacs, and the Jacobs came to Canaan. The Israelites lost their Aramaic language and adopted the Hebrew speech of the Canaanites. The Hebrew Phoenician merchants from the cities of Sidon and Tyre controlled the trade along the Mediterranean coast for more than 1,000 years before there were any economic treaties made with the Israelites. The Hebrew-speaking Phoenicians, aka the Canaanites, established their great city, Carthage, at Tunis in North Africa. All the Canaanites were black people. Before the Phoenicians established their colony in Africa, many Hebrew-speaking Canaanites had migrated across northern Africa. One Tosefta, quoting an older source, says that when Joshua approached Canaan, he told the inhabitants that 3 courses were open to them. They could either leave the country, or they could sue for peace, or they could declare war against him. The Girgashites, among others, preferred to withdraw into Africa. The Tosefta goes on to say that the Amorites, the Cammonites, the Kenites, and the Kenizzites, some of whom figure among the founders of Carthage, also went to Africa. These traditions date from a period when communication between Africa and Phoenicia was continuous. The proper names of Girgash and Kenaz are often met with the Carthaginian and the Phoenician inscriptions. The Talmud says that the Canaanites in Africa asked Alexander the Great to restore to them their country, which had been taken from their ancestors by Joshua ben Nun. These traditions have been ratified by the fathers of the church. Thus, St. Jerome calls to witness the Talmud to support his statement that the Girgashites established colonies in Africa, and St. Augustine designates the natives of Africa as Canaanites. The prophet Isaiah in chapter 19 verse 18 says that the 5 cities in Africa will speak the language of Canaan. We should not forget that the Israelites have been engaged in commercial enterprises, activities, and migrations since Solomon's treaty with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians established their metropolis, Carthage, in the 9th century BC. Eventually, they conquered the neighboring tribes from Libya to the Atlantic Ocean, decimating their Hebrew Phoenician language and culture in every direction. The Hebrew Phoenician language and culture were invigorated and stretched by the deportation and the migration of energetic black Hebrews from Palestine. Ptolemy Soter of Egypt conquered Syria and Phoenicia, deporting more than 100,000 Hebrews. The Persian king Cambyses had previously sanctioned the colonization of Hebrews in Egypt. During the wars of the Maccabees, thousands of Hebrews became slaves and exiles. Ptolemy Lathyrus captured 10,000 slaves from the region of the Sea of Galilee. The kings of Egypt, Psamtik I and Psamtik II, used Israelite garrison on the Egyptian borders near Libya. The wars with Rome forced hundreds of thousands more to escape into North Africa. During the Punic Wars and after, North Africa contained a large Hebrew population. This Hebrew population made converts and intermarried with the Canaanites and the native Africans. At the ruins of Carthage, archaeologists have found about 4,000 inscriptions in the ancient language of Canaan. Nahum Slaw says that these inscriptions date from the time of Nehemiah, of Simon the Just, of Hannibal, and of Hasdrubal, said Slouch. And most valuable of all, we have found again the ancient language and writing of the Canaan, the rich, idiomatic speech of the city, which once counted 700,000 inhabitants. And we, Hebrew writers, we who write and feel in our biblical tongue, have recognized at once that this recalled Phoenician language is nothing more or less than Hebrew, a pure Hebrew dialect, nearly the same as was spoken in the country of Israel. The population of Carthage was derived from Palestine, and its civilization was Hebraic in origin. Slouch is certain after much research that the language Hannibal spoke, in which he directed his troops, was Hebrew. There is evidence that the Carthaginians possessed a high priesthood, and their ceremonies and sacrifices were similar to the rituals found in the book of Leviticus. According to some inscriptions, the Hebrew tribes of Asher and Zebulun were in Carthage from the foundation of the city. At the ruins of Carthage, we excavated many inscriptions containing many Hebrew names such as Joab, Joaz, and Joel. The city of Tunis is said to be neither Arab nor European. Tunis is a Jewish city. Nowhere else does the Jew feel at home as he does in Tunis. Slouch says so beautifully, and indeed, Tunis, the interior of Hebrew Carthage, is the eternal city of the Jews. For, like the phoenix, the Jews have risen again and again out of the ashes of their destruction. After the sacking of Carthage, the Jews were found again in Carthage under Roman domination. After the Byzantine persecutions, they fled into the desert, and even under the persecution of the Arabs, the Jews somehow managed to survive catastrophe after catastrophe. In less than 100 years, the black Arabs had pushed their way completely across North Africa in the 7th century. At this time, the Arabs were black. They had not mixed much with white people. The Arabs did penetrate into the interior of the Sahara Desert, but only in a small amount of numbers, so that the territory remained basically African. Muley Idris, the descendant of Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad, brought northern Morocco under his control late in the 7th century. His son and successor was Idris II, who founded the Kingdom of Fez. At this time, in the land of Spain, the black Jews were persecuted, and many had fled to Morocco for refuge. As a result of this persecution, the Jews of Morocco and the Moors planned to invade Spain with the assistance of Spanish Jews. In the meantime, the plot was uncovered, and the Jews of Spain suffered for their intentions. Early in the 8th century, the Mohammedans from Morocco, united with the black Jews, made what we call an amphibious landing at Gibraltar. This invasion was successful. Nahon Slouch says that the first one to set foot on the soil of Spain was General Tarif, a Jew of the tribe of Simeon, after whom the island of Tarifa, opposite Tangiers, was named. However, the rock of Gibraltar, previously known as the Pillars of Hercules, received its new name from the great Moorish conqueror Jebel al-Tariq, which means the mountain of Tariq. Here is a vivid account of the conquering Moors described by a writer who sympathized with Christian Spain. The reins of their horses were as fire, their faces black as pitch, their eyes shone like burning candles, their horses were swift as leopards, and the riders fiercer than a wolf in the sheepfold at night. The noble Goths were broken in an hour, quicker than tongue can tell. Oh, luckless Spain! These black Moors ruled over parts of Spain for more than 700 years. During this time, the Moors developed the greatest cultural civilization known anywhere in Europe. In the last half of the 11th century, there emerged a powerful dynasty of sultans from Senegal, West Africa, known as the Almoravides. They established their capital at Marrakech, Morocco, and became masters of a new empire that included Senegal, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, and southern Spain. This empire was even larger than Western Europe. At this time, the first general of the Senegalese was Abu Bakr, who was supplanted by a stronger general, Yusuf bin Tashfin. Yusuf's first aim was to construct an elephant capital with marvelous houses, a marble-floored palace, a beautiful flower beds. The city that he built, Marrakech or Morocco City, became the name of this country. When Moorish power was declining in Spain, Yusuf crossed the Mediterranean into Spain in order to reinforce Moorish control. He brought 15,000 black troops with him and defeated Alfonso VI with his 70,000 Christians at the Battle of Zalaca. During the wars of the Almoravides, the greatest commander and hero of Spanish literature was slain. His name was Rodrigo Diaz de Bivar, known as El Cid. The Moors were known for more than just conquest. While the remaining part of Europe was in a state of ignorance, the Spanish people took advantage of the knowledge of the Black Moors. During the Moorish rule, many other capitals of Europe were made hamlets, but Cordova, the city of Spain, was a booming city. It is said that after dark, one could walk many miles in Cordova and never pass through a street not lighted by public lights. When a person walked out after dark in London, he had to carry a candle or a lantern with him to illuminate his path and had to wear high shoes to walk through the thick mud and often covered with the roads. When many Europeans were garbed in skins and in coarse garments, the Moors were wearing silk, linen, and cotton cloth. They also washed in 900 bathhouses of Cordova. The palace of the Moorish Sultan or Caliph was far greater in beauty, comfort, and wealth than any of the castles of the medieval kings. The Moors used extremely highly polished marble in their construction. The sides of the walls were particularly carved, and the floors were made with various decorations called mosaics. It is said that the Moors were masters in mosaic work. The Arabs and Moor were known not only for their handicraft, but also for their science. Most of the knowledge of ancient Greece and the Near East was unknown in Europe during the medieval period. The Arabs had come into close relationship with Greek and Persian culture. The Arabs did not destroy this culture. Instead, they brought it to North Africa. There are many famous Moorish and Hebrew scholars in southern Spain. The black Jews, like the Arabs and Moors, made a great contribution not only to Afro-Asia civilization, but also to the European. The Jews in the East knew Greek and Syriac. They helped translate the works of the Greek philosophers into Arabic. In turn, these works were studied by the Arab-speaking Jews of North Africa and Spain and translated into the Hebrew. The black Jews of the Moorish Kingdom of Spain translated these works into the Latin language, and from Spain, the sciences of the Greeks and the Afro-Asian people were transmitted to Western Europe. Erudite Moorish men made particular contributions to philosophy, medicine, mathematics, chemistry, astronomy, and botany. The Muslim doctors were no sawbones, but masters of their science. They established academies and universities for the rich. Also, there were many free schools. They were excellent libraries. The scholarly Caliph of Cordova in the 10th century set all over the world for books. The library of this Caliph contained over 400,000 volumes. Moorish normal life was based on agriculture, manufacturing, and trade. The Moors brought into Spain rice, cotton, peaches, orange, and lemons. Silk culture was introduced into Spain by the Moors. The Moors had fine pottery, glazed tiles, silks, velvets, brocades, jewels, and ornamental leather products. Moorish civilizations had a gigantic effect on Portugal and Spain. This is the reason that these two commerce were the first European powers to emerge after the Dark Ages. In the process of time, the Moors were driven southward. In the 11th century, El Cid conquered the great Moorish city of Valencia. Much later, in the 13th century, the King of Castile conquered Sevilla and Cordova. After the Moors were pushed into a small region called Grenada, some of the outstanding black Jews of Portugal, Spain, and North Africa were of the following: Hasdai ibn Shaprut, who lived between 925 through 975. He began his career as a physician and continued his interest in the medical profession, especially in drugs. Eventually, he became the physician to the Caliph. Later, he rendered official advice concerning diplomatic matters. He remained in the center of Hebrew scholars whom he supported. He entertained Moses ben Hannah, a representative of the Babylonian academies, who began the foundation of Talmudic learning in Spain. Sadia Gaon was born in 982 in the district of Fayoum under Egypt. He was learned in the Bible and the Talmud, in Arabic as in Hebrew literature, in Greek and Arabic philosophy, and he was once one of the first Hebrew grammarians and philosophic commentators of the Bible. Sadia composed special works on many subjects such as philosophy, astronomy, geography, theology, mathematics, music, poetry, chronology, and philology. Another person on the list is Isaac of Fez, Morocco, or Al-Fasi, and he is named that because he came from the city of Fez and lived during the 11th century. Although the first important academy was founded by Moses ben Hannah in Cordova, the real foundation of Spanish Talmudic tradition was laid by Al-Fasi. The interest of Al-Fasi was the Talmudic law, especially such as were vital for the Hebrews of the dispersion. Samuel ibn Nahilgiah lived from 993 through 1056. He started out as a grocer. His acquisition of knowledge in the languages, mathematics, and philosophy was extraordinary. Because Samuel had a beautiful handwriting, he was appointed secretary of the Grand Vizier. And this position he was able to put to good use his wisdom and knowledge. When the Vizier died, Samuel succeeded him as advisor to the Moorish king of Grenada. On several occasions, he was appointed as the head of the Moorish armies of Grenada. Samuel ibn Nahaldallah was respected also in Jewish circles. The king of Grenada elevated him to the position of Najib, that is, prince or leader of the Jews. Moses Maimonides was an outstanding black Jew during the Middle Ages. He is known as Rambam. Moses was born in Cordova on March 30th, 1135. The eve of the Passover, his father, Manma, was an offspring of the great family of scholars and religious leaders. His family tree had been traced to Rabbi Judah, the prince, the composer of the Mishmah, to the royal house of David. While the Talmud and the Rabbinics were the chief subjects of the Maimonides, he dedicated time to the sciences that were taught and postulated by the ancient Greeks and medieval Arabs. He received his learning under Hebrew and Moorish teachers, and before long, He was learned in the natural sciences, mathematics, medicines, metaphysics, philosophy, and logic. In the year 1145, when Moses was 10 years of age, Abdullah ibn Tumar, a religious fanatic, founded the dynasties of the Almohades. The Almohades, who proclaimed a religion of absolute monotheism, succeeded after many battles in expelling the Almoravids, the Black Moors, from the highland of Morocco, and established their own rule over the Moorish Empire. The Almohades directed a reign of terror and persecution not only against Judaism and Christianity, but also against the sectarians in Islam. The Almohades displayed their intolerance for other religions. There were laws against the existence of churches and synagogues. Jews and Christians were given the one alternative, Islam or death. Abdullah Humanin, who succeeded Abdullah ibn Tumar, permitted heretics to depart from his country. Christian exiles found asylum in northern Spain. It was difficult for the Jews to find a place of security, and many of them died by the sword as martyrs for their religion. Some of the Jews converted to Islam as a disguise and remained loyal to their own faith, practicing Judaism in secret. About the middle of the 12th century, when Maimonides was 13 years of age, the Almohades crossed the Mediterranean into Spain and established their power in Andalusia. In the late spring of that year, the Almohades invaded the city of Cordova and instituted a reign of terror and persecution. The magnificent synagogues were destroyed, and the Talmudic schools at Seville and Lucena were closed, and the non-believers in Islam, Jews and Christians, were given the alternatives of Islam, expulsion, or death. Because of all of this turmoil and social unrest, the family of Moses Maimonides decided to depart from that inhospitable land and to sail across the Mediterranean to Morocco in northern Africa. They remained in the city of Fez for about 5 years and then traveled to Palestine because the environment was not conducive to learning. Moses moved to Egypt. Moses Maimonides continued his studies in medicine. His fame as a physician now spread throughout Egypt and beyond. It is said that Moses was offered a position as a physician to King Richard, the Lion-Hearted, the leader of the Third Crusade, and when Moses was about 50 years of age, he was appointed by Aphadhel, the vizier of Egypt, as his own medical advisor, and he was given a place among the royal physicians. Moses was also a great leader and judge of the Egyptian Jewish community. His sons followed in his footsteps, receiving the leadership of the Jewish communities and as a physician to the Sultan. Other outstanding black Jews in Spain were poets such as Solomon ibn Gabriel, Moses ibn Ezra, and Judah ha-Levi. It was 1492 AD when the Moorish stronghold of Granada surrendered to the armies of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. For the first time since the year 711, all of Spain was in Christian hands. The decree to expel the Jews from Spain was signed on March 31st. In one of the corridors of the great Alhambra, the palace of the Moorish kings of Granada, the reason given for the expulsion of the Jews was that it was thought that they corrupted the Marranos, meaning Jews converted to Christianity, but privately encouraging them to the disloyalty to Christianity. The ultimatum given to the Jews expired August 1st, 1492, but the last group of Jews did not leave until August 2nd, 1492. This date is of the strange coincidence. That day was the 9th of Ab, the fast day which is reminiscent of the destruction of the first and second temples, Professor Alan Garbe says that the reign of the last Jewish king of Ghana was terminated in 1492. In order to satisfy Queen Isabella of Spain, King Manuel of Portugal promulgated the royal decree expelling the Jews and Moors from his country in 1496. The Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal were scattered throughout the Mediterranean coast. It is estimated that over 100,000 Jews departed from Spain and Portugal during the persecution and the expulsion. Some of these Jews went into Northern Europe, Italy, and Turkey, but most of them went to the Muslim countries of Northern and Western Africa. These black Jews would naturally go to African countries, most of all because of less persecution, and they could disguise themselves easily among blacks.